let's talk about the particle system in Ventuz. So I think this is a kind of a more interesting topic as the previous tutorials we did here about all that Ventuz nodes. But it's a pretty interesting one, and yes, let's jump right in. Like always, we change here to our logic layout and I create a new scene. Okay, you can find the particle system under the toolbox in the geometry category. So to drag and drop it in, and let me explain you first some basics about a particle system. Okay, so a particle system basically can have multiple particle streams inside, right? As many as you want, actually, depending on your power of your machine. But I think that should be not an issue anymore in this time. And then, of course, each particle stream needs to have modules to work with. Okay, so when we by default simply drag and drop a particle system inside here, we can't see anything. Okay, that's why, because we have to add something. Okay, so to that we see something, every base particle system needs at least two modules, and that modules you can find here if you click here that add module, and then we can see here the different categories. We have emitters, we have renderers, we have specials, and we have modifiers. That a particle system works, we need at least two modules. That's one emitter and one renderer. Okay, to show you that right now, let's add here a grid emitter, and we still can't see anything because we need another module, and that's a renderer. And then let's use here a simple sprite renderer. Okay, and now we can see already we have here, or we see at least 4 dots, right? So if I put an axis here in front of my particle system and I rotate it a bit, then you can see we actually have a grid setup, yeah, from our grid emitter with a count of 4 in X, with a count of 4 in Y, and with a size of X, Y, and size Y 1, right? So let's increase maybe that size a little bit to, let's say, 10, and this one 10 as well. And now we can add more, let's make it even, let's add more counts or more particles in X and Y as well, right? So this is these are the main properties of your grid emitter, right? So we have many more emitters here in Ventuz. We don't talk about all of them, but we talk about a basic one, which should help to kickstart you using the particle system, and don't be scared of it, right? Okay, so if you want to change that emitter system, you also can do it right away here, right? You can change the emitters now from here. Also, if you don't want to use that sprites, then you also can change them here, or you simply delete that sprite here and use another renderer like a mesh. Right now we have our particles are basically represented by meshes, yeah, in this case by a cube. So let's set up this grid a little bit differently, because I think we have too many cubes here now. And as you can see, if we bring that cube count down, then we can see this, that we really have, yeah, individual cubes represent particle basically. Okay, so maybe let's make that a bit bigger. Let's make that something like 40 and 40, and let's add here more in the X, and let's also add more here in the Y, because then we can see something more. And let's also rotate this particle system a little bit like that. Okay, right now we only can see that grid emitter is spawning our cubes, our meshes, right? If we go back here, you also can see we have different settings. You can change the settings of your cubes. You can add a bevel radius, things like that. You even can change the geometry to a sphere, or to all basically in engine, or all the meshes available inside Ventuz. Okay, so let's go with the cube for now. And let's add some more stuff here, right? So if we want to add, for example, some noise, right? So simply add a modifier noise. We simply drag and click it, and then it's added here in our series of modules, right? And that's also very important. The modules, the sequence of the modules from left to right, or the series of the modules, is important. So a rule of thumb is that you have to, yeah, let's say every particle system should start with an emitter and should some kind of end with a renderer, right? Or a simulation, but we will come to that very soon as well. But as you can see, this noise is doing nothing now because we have to bring it into the right position. So we have to bring that noise here between our emitter and between our renderer. Okay, now we have our noise here. And as you can see, once we select that module, we have all the different properties for that selected module. In this case, we have the scale in X, we have the scale in Y, and scale, rotation, blah, 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 blah. Many different things, right? So if we move or animate our translation now, then we can get already some movement if you want, right? So let's say I want to animate it a little bit like this, but maybe very slowly, like 10 seconds, right? Then you can do that. But there are also many other ways which we will cover very soon here. Okay, another way to add noise or to transform your particle system is simply by also like the noise node. Let's using now a texture node, right? And this texture node, again, we have to bring it here to the center or in between our emitter and our renderer. And now you can see this modifier, this texture modifier is now applying that noise texture to our particles, to our cube particles, okay? We also can change that here. We have the target, right? So the target is now the color in the alpha. And of course, we also have here our scale X, Y, Z, our translation. So if we move that, then you can see we can animate that color over our particles. What we also can do, we can change our target here, for example, to the size, right? And now that black and white noise texture is affecting our size. You also can create your own noise textures. Basically, what it does, everything what is fully white, yeah, so RGB 255, 255, 255 will have full size, and everything down to black will get smaller up to 0, which is represented by black in that case, okay? And all that gray tones in between will have then medium sizes, okay? So as you can see, if we translate this over X, it's okay, but it's a little bit sometimes too heavy noise, right? So if we want to have that smoother, we also simply can load our own texture, or we can use inbuilt one, which is here that liquid normal map. And as you can see already, it looks a bit smoother already. If we translate this over X, we can see we have a more smooth movement of, or not movement, actually a change of the size of our cubes, right? Of course, we also can change that target to the position, right? So we have here many different things, play around with all of them. Let's take position, and now we can see a little bit is happening because our global axis, or the target axis, is our x-axis, but let's say I want to affect our y-axis, right? And if we move this now, then we have a very smooth, nice little wave animation from our particle cube grid, okay? Then you of course have here many more options like that remap minimum. Let's bring that maybe to 10, right? Or let's maybe not that heavy, let's make it 5. And now you can see we have a much more, yeah, stronger waveform animation here on our cubes, okay? And again, here you are able now to simply animate these guys in whatever direction you want, right? And can also change the speed here, maybe to 5. Now let's bring that also a bit more down to 5, right? So now you can create, you can add colors, you can add gradients, you can add lights to that. You can copy them and yeah, create nice background motion for your scene, okay? So let's jump to the next important guy or emitter, right? Okay, let's talk about another very important emitter here. So to do that, we simply delete this guy and we add an empty particle system, which is doing nothing. like we know now why. So we have now here one inline stream and we add a module, and this time we don't use that grid emitter, this time we use a source emitter. Yeah, so we can't see anything because like we talked before, we need at least two modules, an emitter and a renderer. Let's use a sprite now. As we can see now, something is happening, right? So our sprite or our source emitter is basically emitting sprites out of our scene root, okay? So let's check now the properties of our source emitter, right? So we have here a random position X, random position Y. So if I change that position X, then that emitter will basically emit that particles over our value we set up here in X, right? We can do that in Y, we can do that in Z as well, okay? Let's bring that here, right? So we can't see set now because we are looking straight onto that guy. Then we have here by default a speed X, speed Y, and speed Z. And the speed Y is 1, and that's exactly why that particles flying up, right? So if we put them to 0, then that particles will just simply spawn here in the center. Let me maybe zoom in here a little bit. Let's increase that so you can see now that particles will simply spawn in the center and only get affected by that random speed all. If we put that to 0, then we simply will have many particles spawned at the scene center, but they won't move at all, right? So if we increase that random speed in all directions, then we get already a little bit a more nicer look. So let's bring that back to default. So we have a little bit more space to work. As you can see, if we increase that random speed all, then that particles are flying out into all directions, right? Then we also have here the rate, the spawn rate. So we have 100 per second. If we bring that to 10,000, right, then that source emitter will spawn 10,000 particles every second, right? Then we also have a lifetime. Yeah, so that means how long is the life of a particle before it dies. So let's bring that down maybe to 10, and let's make that a bit more easy. Let's put that maybe to 0.2 like default, and let's give it up speed into the Y direction. And now we can see, let's maybe even make it smaller. Let's say we just spawn 1 particle per second. Okay, so with that 1 particle per second and a lifetime of 2, so it spawns and after 2 seconds it dies. Okay, so it spawns and after 2 seconds it dies. Okay, so we also can give it a lifetime of 10. Then they will live much more longer until they are out of our render window, for example. So depending on your needs, you can use that as well. Okay, so let's play around with this a bit. For example, let's say I want to build a very simple snowflake rain system or something like that. So to do that, let's bring that speed Y down to minus, right? Because I want that our snow is falling down like this. We have a lifetime of 10 seconds now. Let's increase that maybe a bit as well. And let's also increase the spawn rate. And what we also will do, we will increase the random position because I don't want that the particles get always emitted here in the scene center. I want that they get emitted all over the axis, all over my screen in a random X position, right? So we simply increase that random X position, right? And the only last thing what we have to do now, we have to bring that particle system more up because I want that let's call them snowflakes now are spawned outside of my renderer. I can do that simply here with the axis in front of my particle system. Another way to do it, if you don't want to have that, if you want to have it encapsulated in your particle system, you simply go here to your emitter, and then you simply can add here under transform, you add here transform 3D, and then it's basically the same like axis, and simply bring it up here, right? So now we have that snowflakes, but they are still living too short. So let's increase their lifetime, maybe to something like 30 seconds, right? Then we have enough time to see them falling all over our render window. Of course, now we can add some more modifiers. For example, let's add here a force. Let's add that force. As we add that force, nothing will happen. So like I mentioned before, it's important that you take care of the series or the sequence where you put the different nodes. Okay, so again, a force always should be in between an emitter and a renderer. So let's bring them at that position. And now we see that force is actually doing something. Yeah, so it's a very strong force. So if we select our force and check that settings, if we bring that fall off down, then we can see something is happening already, right? And the smaller we bring that fall off, the less that force is basically, right? And if we bring this force up now, right, then you can see yes, something is happening there. Yeah, so this is now the force modifier. Then we have directional gravity, we have a range force, we have a point force, we have noises like wobbles, and many other guys. I don't go through all of them. You simply try and error them on your own because most of them have very similar settings, right? But one important thing or one tip what I want to give you here with that wobble, if you also add here, for example, transform 3D, right? Then you can move that force around and can basically interact with your particle system, right? So this is something where we also will talk about very soon when we cover our interactive nodes, yeah, the touch nodes, that you really can create art installations with Ventuz, with the particle systems, and let people do crazy things with your particle system. Okay, so maybe let's add another important node, and that's here now our simulation node, right? So that simulation node we will also need in the next thing I will show you shortly, right? So if you see, if you use that simulation node, that particle system looks different, yeah, because that forces are getting added up now in that simulation node, and basically that force is speaking together and things like that, right? So if I change this force now here to the left, you can see that's working out, but with a little bit of a delay, but that's all good. So simply try and error here with your, yeah, with your settings, right? So if I make that fall off much more higher, and maybe our force as well, and let's bring down that force again, that fall off again, right? Somewhere here, I don't know, now it's too, it doesn't matter. But if we change now here, right, our X and Y, yeah, then you can see we really already can interact with that. Yeah, so let me show you maybe very quickly what I mean. Let's make that to 200. If I change that here, so you can see now it's a little bit more responsive. So if I add, for example, interactive node, I don't cover that here now, but I just simply add it. And that interactive node, I just want to get the position of my mouse, right? So I simply go to interaction and I take here our touchable node, put that guy here, and let's delete all that guys. And I simply just want to have the position of 1. Let's remove this guy. And now we have the position of exactly one guy here, right? And if I simply add an anchor here, if I simply add an anchor here behind my ripple, so with that anchor, we can add this anchor now to our force, right? So if you remember before, I changed that to transformation, but I also can change that to anchor, right? And if I simply connect that anchor now to my force, right? So now you can see, now we already can interact with this particle system, right? If I go out, if I go left, if I go right. As you can see, many things are possible with interactive particle systems. Yes, we will cover that as well, I guess, in another tutorial, because it's very complex and can take a long time. So let's jump to another important thing in the particle system world. I want to explain you the secondary emitter. Like I said at the very beginning, let's go back to our world, sorry, to our geometry at the particle system. As I explained you before, a particle system can have many particle streams, right? So let's say, let's make a very simple example. Let's say we want to create a firework. Yeah, one rocket is fired from somewhere, is going up into the sky, and then it's exploding, right? So for this, we want to use at least two particle streams. The first particle stream should be my rocket. So I have my default particle stream here. Let's call that guy rocket. And my second particle stream, I want to call that explosion. Okay. And now we have to build basically the logic in the particle system. Let's say my rocket gets fired, it's flying up, 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 up. And once it's dead, I can define that by that lifetime. Once it's killed, that should trigger my explosion. Okay, so let's do that. Let's delete it first and let's start with that rocket first to keep it simple and easy to understand. Again, to do that, we need a module, and that module is a source. And I simply want to use a sprite as a rocket representation. Okay, so let's do that. In our source, we change the spawn rate to, let's say, 0.5, sorry, not 5, 0.5, because I only want to spawn a rocket every 2 seconds, right? So we have now here the lifetime of 2. Let's give it a lifetime of 3. So this particle is now living 3 seconds, right? 1, 2, 3, then it's dying, and the next is spawning. So let's actually bring that down to only every 4 seconds. So 1, 2, 3, then it's dying, and I also want to give it a big a larger speed into the Y direction. Okay, so now we are starting in the center, but we don't see when it dies. So let's also bring that down. Let's add here that transform 3D, and let's bring that a bit more down. Yeah, maybe that's okay. Can bring it more down. Maybe let's try 15. Not sure if you can see that. Let's make 12. Oh, sorry, minus 12, of course. So we can see it's firing from here, from the bottom of my screen, and it's somewhere dying in that area. Okay, so first step is done. So what we need to do now, we need to add a simulation loop. Okay, so that's important. So let's add a simulation loop, and we need to know when is a particle or when are particles dying. Okay, so we do that with that simulation loop, and we simply have to enable here the timeout event, and we give it a name, and we simply call that rocket dead. Okay, so simply do it like this, or give it whatever other name you want. And then we need another important node, and that's the link out. Yeah, because with that link out node, we have to communicate with further other particle streams we will add then. Okay, and this link out, we give simply the name like our particle stream name, right? So this is our rocket. So that means I give that link out our name rocket. Okay. So this is pretty much everything we have to do in this first rocket particle system. Okay, we shoot a rocket from the ground up into the sky with a certain speed, and once it's dead, I want to spawn our second explosion particle stream. Let's do that at the inline stream, and let's call that explosion. Okay, so once we do that, we have to set up our two important guys. This is our source. In this case, it's actually not a source, it's a secondary. Okay, it's a secondary source or secondary source of particles. Okay, so let's add that. So we get here now an error, and that's okay, because he says this secondary is only allowed in a simulation loop. So let's add also our simulation module. And let's also add our sprite, because we want to show something. Now we still have error, and that means, hey, error link not found. Yes, because our secondary emitter, he wants to know, hey, when should I fire? Yeah, and I want that he fire when the rocket is dead. Yeah, so we created that event before, so we simply go here to the link name and we choose here rocket dead. Now we still can't see anything, and that's because we have everything here. Let's bring that sprite here. That's okay. But we can't see anything because that secondary is actually not using the rate of particles. He's actually using the burst. Yeah, so let's put it now maybe to 500, and let's see what happens. So that particles go up, and something is happening. Yes, you can see. So the burst is working here from our second particle stream once a particle is dead. Okay, so this is all default now. So we simply have to set up our settings here. So I want to have random speed of 20. Right, so now it should be a much nicer explosion already. Maybe that's a little bit too much. Let's bring it down to 10. And our rocket is going up, chung chung chung, explosion. Right, so these are already the basics how you can use multiple streams to create, yeah, super nice cool particle systems, right? Explosions, rain, shooting games, whatever you want, right? Let's talk a bit more about how we can make this nicer. For example, let's say I want to add a trail to my rocket here, right? So let's add another inline stream and let's bring that guy here in the center in between, because we have our rocket. Our rocket should spawn also some particles all the time once it's going up, because this is boring, right? So let's call that trail. And this trail also needs a couple of things. So we need here as well emitter. A secondary is okay. We need a simulation, and we need a sprite. And of course, we need a link name, and that link name is in that case the rocket, right? And once we do that, we should see already that we have that kind of trail, right? Which we simply now have to set up a little bit and adjust, because by default the lifetime is 2 seconds. That's maybe a bit too long for our trail. So maybe I just want to have it, yeah, 0.5 seconds, something like that. And also let's bring down that random position Y, and let's increase a bit here that random in all directions, maybe like that. Let's make it 2. Right, and now we have already this nice little trail of particles. So next thing, maybe what we want to do, because the particles also have now the same size, they die, looks a little bit not so nice. So what we can do, we simply can add a modifier to our rocket. Doesn't matter, our rocket will leave like that, but our trail, for example, I want that the older that particles get, the smaller they should get, right? So let's do that. So we simply add here in our trail particle stream, we simply add a gradient, and we put that gradient here in front of our node, and we get another error. And you will see that error many times if you use that simulation loops, and it simply tells you, hey, in a simulation loop, color alpha attribute must be overwritten before it can be added or multiplied. Okay, so this is basically this operation which you simply have to change to override, and now all the errors are gone. Your particle system will get resetted and it will work. Now you can see already something is happening. Yeah, so we use that gradient now by age, as you can see here. If we select that gradient module, the source is age and the target is our color in alpha, but I want to use it actually for the size, right? So that means the older our particles get, the smaller they get. And now you can see we have this nice little trail. Maybe we can even give it a little bit a longer lifetime. Let's maybe make it 1 second. And let's see, yes, I think that's okay, right? So the older they get, the smaller they get, so they are nicely fade out of the scene, right? Let's do the same here with our explosion as well. Let's go here to our explosion particle stream. Let's add a gradient here, and let's put it here in between. We remember now we have to change that operation to override, and we simply change the age to position, to size, right? Now we change that. Every time you change some settings here in the simulation loop, that simulation basically will reset. But now you can see that explosion nicely fades out, okay? And I also think maybe we can also give the lifetime now a little bit more time. The part is a little bit more time to live. Let's make it 4. Yes, and as you can see, they nicely fade out now, right? Last thing what we do in this tutorial, let's add some colors. Let's maybe start with our trail first. So our trail should have some color. Let's also maybe use a gradient. Why not? Let's bring that guy here. And again, we have to change that to override. I want to use a gradient, but not a black and white gradient. I want to use maybe, let's use the black and white, but change the colors. Black to, for example, let's say reddish. And maybe here we have it a little bit more orange, yellowish, right? Something like that. Yeah, that's like a nice fireworks going up into the sky, right? And then the explosion is coming. Let's do the same for our explosion, or not the same, something similar. Let's also maybe use a gradient here. Let's put that guy here, change the operation to override. And maybe let's try and error something. Let's go here. Let's change black to maybe yellowish, orangish, and the white one maybe we change to or something reddish or bluish. Let's see, yeah, why not? Maybe we add one more here. This one is then red, something like that. Yeah, so you really can play around a lot with these particle systems to create pretty cool stunning effects. What you also can do maybe to make that explosion a bit more attractive, we simply scale up here our sprite, right? As you can see, yes, I think maybe that's better, even 0.5, right? And of course, you also can add much more to your particle system if you want to make it more attractive, add more gravity, add more forces and things like that.